Marc G, good evening to you, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world, and hello if you're watching a recording of this conversation. So Eimear here, and welcome to another Fireside Chat, where I'm in conversation with a member of the Order of Bards, Ovates and Druids. So I'm here in Kilkenny, and we are between two storms. Storm Dudley has passed, and we're expecting Storm Eunice to bring lots of snow and wind, which is, well, it won't be coming to Kilkenny, it's coming to the southwest and the north. So just type in your name and let me know where you're from. Hi, Patrick, Vincent, that's right, greetings from Kent. May everyone be safe through Storm Eunice. Let's hope. Hi, Stephanie from Utah, London, Ballina, Killaloe, that's Alan, Edinburgh, Belgium. Lovely to see you. And Blake from New Hampshire. And Linda, well done, you're up. And Linda is in Norfolk Island in Australia. And Robbie in Dubai from Scotland, lovely. North Cornwall, West Yorkshire, Portsmouth. Hi, Red, lovely to see you. And Sile from Ulster, lovely. Anglesey, great. And Virginia, lovely. South Wales, a storm warning here too, great. Hi, Sean from Sylvan Grove, lovely to see you. And Pat from Ulster. And Sue from Northamptonshire. Anyway, you're all very, very welcome. And let me introduce you to my guest this evening. So I would like you just to welcome Marc G. So Marc, you are so welcome to this Fireside Chat.
Thank you so much for having me, Eimear. It's a privilege to be here. I've enjoyed listening to you interview many people, and now it's my turn. So hi, everybody. Nice to meet you.
So, judging by your accent, you are English, but you're not there. Where are you?
Yeah, I'm English, born and bred. I'm currently living in Morocco in North Africa. I spent most of my adult life traveling and living in various countries, and right now I find myself here, just on the edge of the Atlas Mountains.
Wow. So what's it like? I don't know, we'll come to where you come from in England. Oh yeah, maybe where do you come from in England? And just tell me a little bit about the landscape and how you manage the transition to below the mountain.
So I was born in Bradford, up in Yorkshire. I used to speak with a Bradford accent at school and then Southern accent at home with my parents. We moved to the Midlands when I was mid-childhood. So I grew up in Worcestershire, on the edge of Wales, and I guess always found some connection with Wales because we'd go there for holidays and up to the mountains, but I lived on the English side of the border.
Okay. Howard, my husband, lived in Leeds, Bradford. He worked there as a psychiatrist nearly 30 years ago. So I've never been myself, but he loved working there. So what was the landscape like in Bradford for you? I mean, were you in the city, or were you in the outskirts, or what?
I think I was 7 when we moved away, so I don't fully remember, but I have a few poignant memories. I think we lived on the edge of town in a kind of suburban area, but my parents were avid walkers, so we'd always go out at the weekends, out into the North York moors. I think I remember Ilkley Moor.
Yes.
Barthout, yeah. Various woodlands, and I have a memory once with one of my cousins. We were walking through the woods somewhere out there. I have no idea where, and there were all these twisted, gnarled trees as you find in native woodlands, and little holes in the trunks and stuff. And I just remember this imagination game that we were playing. Like, there might be a fairy living in that one, and there might be some little creatures living in here, and oh, that mouse lives down the bottom there. And that's a particular memory of the time there.
Oh, beautiful. So then you moved. Where did you go? Did you go to Worcestershire then? South after Bradford?
Yeah. So my parents moved. I think it was my dad's job. Various things. Don't fully remember, but.
And what was that landscape like?
It was very different. We were on the edge of the town, halfway between Worcester and Malvern. So you've got the flat plains and then the Malvern Hills kind of rising up. And I guess that was an initiation for me into mountains. We'd go out walking there quite frequently. And as I got older, became a teenager, I used to bike out to the Malvern Hills and walk in the Malvern Hills for hours. The year 2000, do you remember that long ago? The big,
I do.
is the world going to end? Is the millennium bug going to hit?
That's right, yes.
We stood on top of the Malvern Hills and celebrated New Year's Day arriving, and the millennium bug didn't hit, so that was good.
I remember that talk, but yes. So actually, Hannah Semple said she used to walk the Malvern as a child. Mrs. Joe, she grew up in Malvern, beautiful place. So were the seeds sown? Because I know you're an international mountain leader, and you're living on the foothills, or not the foothills, the foot of the Atlas Mountains. I assume the seeds for your present career were planted while you were living.
Yeah, very much so. My dad had this aim of going up Snowdon once a year, every year. So he'd go with groups of friends. And of course, as a kid, you're like, I want to go. No, it's too dangerous for you. So I nagged him over the years. And eventually, for my 12th birthday, he took me up Snowdon. And if you've been up in Snowdonia, there's various ways to go up. But of course, he took me up the most difficult walking path, which is a ridge called Cribgoch. So it's a knife edge ridge that goes up to the summit of Snowdon. So that was my 12th birthday introduction to mountains, and I guess I've never looked back since. There was something about the wildness and the severity and the beauty of the mountains that really stuck with me.
And it's really interesting because the fact that he took you on the hardest route did not put you off, but I suppose what injected you with the bigger bug.
I convinced a school friend to come a few years later, and we did it again. And I remember my school friend being white in terror on this. There's some sections that are very narrow and edge both sides for several hundred meters. And we got to the end of this ridge. My school friend just looked at me and said, I am never doing that again.
I know one ridge I've walked is Errigal is a mountain in Donegal. Slieve Lu is the other name for it, or probably an older name, the mountain of Lu, the god Lu. And there is a part where you're walking and you can look either side down. Now, it was a sunny day. It wasn't windy. And another time in Carranthool, which is our highest mountain, which by the Atlas standards is fairly small, but it's our biggest one. And I remember walking on a ridge in pelting rain and wind and having to, and I didn't actually put stones in my pocket, but I needed stones in my pocket to keep me down, to keep me standing and stop myself from going away. So they're very invigorating, such walks like that. And being on the edge and being fearful and not, but obviously it's never put you off.
It's not put me off. I mean, you do have some scrapes as you get more and more into it, or near misses, or some people have, bad things happen. But I talk when I take my clients out in the mountains and we have difficult weather days, I'll tell them about this idea of primary fun and secondary fun. So out in the mountains, when you're enjoying it and it's all lovely, that's primary fun. And secondary fun is when maybe it's pouring with rain or the wind's in your face and blowing you over all the time. But then you get down at the end of the day and you feel so wind blown, but so refreshed, and you go, that was good. So that's secondary fun.
Oh, I love that. I mean, I think it's a lovely reframe for this is really hard and challenging and dangerous. Do you take your clients, with ropes, or are you walking on, as I say, your feet with walking poles, or do you use ropes, and are you actually climbing?
So in the British system of training mountain leaders, there are different qualifications depending what your speciality is. So as you said, I'm an international mountain leader. I'm also a summer mountain leader, which is the kind of beginning of like rungs on a ladder. So the first level is summer mountain leader, and then you can go for winter mountain leader, or you can go for international. So I've got both of them, winter and international. You can also go for the more climbing oriented awards. So mountaineering instructor and that kind of thing. or the very top level in the British system is called mountain guide, where you have to be champion level skier and climber and everything else. My work, I stopped at the level of the kind of trekking and walking. So we'll take an emergency rope if we're on difficult terrain, but I never plan to use it. We're not doing a planned climb. That's out of remit for my award. Yeah.
That's my kind of engagement with the mountain. I did Kilimanjaro, oh my God, 15 years ago. And it was wonderful. Hard work and a challenge. I'm so glad I did it. And I went to the top and I came back down again. But had it involved ropes and all of that stuff, it would not be, not for me.
It's a different kind of fun. That's not my kind of fun. I do also guide trail running. So some people think that's completely wacky as well. To run in the mountains is a ridiculous sport, but if you get into it, you get addicted. So that's my passion.
That will never happen to me either. But I I understand the buzz that then hooks you in. And so because I know when I was climbing Kilimanjaro, the thing was go slowly when you're at altitude. So obviously you've worked on your lungs that you can go fast, or are you running on the spot?
Oh no, I mean, as soon as you get above 2,000 meters, definitely above 3,000, you really feel the altitude. So even I have taken a few people running at that altitude, but really on the uphills, you're not doing much more than a power walk.
Okay.
And above, like once I was trying to beat my record running up the highest mountain here, which is called Tubkal, and I was at 3,500 meters, and I was barely crawling. I mean, I was walking very slowly. I thought, I've lost my fitness. What am I doing? And I looked at my heart rate, and my heart rate was right up in the maximum band. I thought, okay, I'm not unfit. This is just really hard. So, yeah.
Wow.
You can acclimatize like you did on Kili, but it's always hard altitude.
Oh well, my only thing is on my 37th birthday, I ran up and down Croagh Patrick in 2.5 hours, and people do that on the last Sunday of July. It's called Reek Sunday, and a lot of people, well, the old days, they did it in their bare feet. I'm not for that, but I was really fit. That was when I was at my peak fitness. I wouldn't do it now at that speed. I would be walking sensibly, but I did. I ran up and down, but I've done it once. That's it. It's wonderful. And Blake says, I love mountains too, but I need to find the gentler paths upwards. My knees just can't take these steeper grades. I'm fine going up. The challenge with the knee is always coming down.
Walking poles often help on the downhill for knees. That's what I do myself, actually.
Yeah, and that's why it's great to be a druid. You have your staff, or maybe two staffs, when you haven't got your walking poles to do that. Vincent says, I did some hiking on mountains in Wales in the army. No idea which ones, but I struggled and I was supposed to be fit. Lol, it's not easy. Yeah, and you know what? I think, people have different kinds of fitness, and different terrains call different people. And what's challenging for one person may not be challenging for another, and vice versa.
One place the army often use is in South Wales, a place called, I think it's the Black Mountains, and it's very desolate moorland, notorious for being hard to navigate. And I've been there a few times and seen the army out training. And once I met their assessor who was on the mountain waiting for them, and he's like, they're completely lost. I can see them down there, but I don't know where they are. They don't know where they are. So that may or may not have been where you were, Vincent. Mm-hmm.
Stephanie says, tell Mark to come to Utah. We have lovely mountains waiting for him here. That's very nice.
There are so many mountains in the world. In one lifetime.
That's true. That's true. So what? So you're in Morocco, and what's it like living there? And how did you manage? Being brought up in Britain and then moving to Morocco.
I mean, it was, as I say, it was many years of travel and exploring the world. This is where we happen to be right now. I don't know if we'll be here. I mean, things were going well. Tourism was going really well. 2019 was the best year ever for tourism here. And then COVID hit, and flights have been blocked for a long time, but they're reopening now. So we don't know. What led me here? Well, I mean, going back to that early, that mountain experience when I was 12, and then through my teenage years, I guess I was a bit of a strange child. My mum was worried for me at one point because I didn't really have many close friends. I I just remember my teenage years going out into the woods and doing all that kind of stuff that many of the listeners will be used to. I laugh because, the age of 15, 16, all my classmates, they were trying to get fake IDs so they could go to the pub and go to the nightclubs. And I was out in the woods learning how to light fires and practicing survival techniques and stuff. So I was definitely not normal in that sense for my school, and got picked on and bullied quite a lot, which just pushed me more and more into being a bit of a loner and doing what I enjoyed, not fitting in with the crowd. I don't know if anyone remembers back, it must have been 92, 93, sometime around then, a TV program came on called Country Tracks. And, I'd watch anything. I watched David Attenborough, and then this Country Tracks came on. And there was just a tiny slot in the half hour where this guy, completely unknown guy at that point, would be making fires by rubbing sticks together. And he built a coracle one episode, he built shelters and stuff. And I videoed all of these in the days of video, and I would watch them again and again. And of course, that guy, that was his introduction to TV, but he was Ray Mears, and he became a very famous TV personality. So he was the inspiration right from the beginning of his career. And I'd just go out to the woods and practice, practicing lighting fires in places where I wasn't even allowed to be, way off the public footpaths. I figured that the animals could live there and go and explore and jump fences and do whatever. So as long as the farmers didn't see me, I wasn't destroying or seeking to damage their property. I was just enjoying the woodlands. Obviously, I didn't spend my whole childhood in the woods, but it was a significant part of what made me love outdoors.
Oh, we loved watching Ray Mears. I didn't watch that one, but certainly my children, because they did bushcraft. They were home educated, so they went off to forest schools and learned how to skin rabbits and light fires, etc. And just great training, absolutely great training. So I didn't have that. We were off in the woods unsupervised as children, because that was rural Ireland and off you could go. And then I was in boarding school in my teens, so I didn't have to fake my ID to go to a pub because I was in boarding school. But I would have loved to have had access to that as a child, as a teenager. And girls didn't do, well, where I was, there were no Girl Guides. It was, I think, Boy Scouts. But it's like things, girls don't do that, which crazy. Anyway.
Yeah, I think that's changed. I'm not in touch with that world now. I think it's changed, hopefully. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So what brought you to Druidry then?
So there was a part between what brought me here and that childhood stuff. I guess I went off to agricultural college. My school were pushing me to go to Oxford or Cambridge. It was a grammar school. It was all about academic achievement, and you were only something if you were doing really well. As someone who wasn't competitive, that never really stuck with me. So I ended up going off and studying conservation and gamekeeping and this kind of thing. Hoping that I would find that love for nature that I had. Unfortunately, it was pretty similar there. Everyone was into going out to the pubs at the weekends. I was many years older before I first started drinking, for no real reason, just it wasn't my thing then, before I touched anything. But so I guess that gave me a deep dissatisfaction with Western culture and, what it pushes you to do and to be. And that slowly resulted in me traveling and looking for answers. So I had things like Dances with Wolves, where the guy goes off, white guy goes off and becomes like one of the indigenous people. Lawrence of Arabia, similar kind of theme, and other things that influenced me. So I guess in my romantic early adulthood, I was hoping to discover something like that, where I could find a culture that was really in tune with nature and this kind of thing. And actually, that never really happened. I discovered that in all the tribes I've visited or traveled with or met, humans are fairly similar across the world. We're all really just looking out for ourselves, looking out for, to get enough food on the table and to feed the kids. So I think there was a kind of disappointment in not finding my idealism.
You didn't meet any hunter-gatherer tribes, no?
No, I never got that far. I traveled a bit, but not as much as I could have if I'd really had them. There was a time when I was coming back to the UK, working on a farm or something like that for 6 months, earn some money, then I'd go off traveling a bit, come back, do something more. Sorry.
in Tanzania. I've spent a lot of time in Tanzania, and remember meeting some hunter-gatherer healers. But it was interesting to see them, and some had come back from a hunt with baboon, so we had some baboon meat, and they just have very little impact on the environment, but they were being pushed further and further into the bush because the pastoralists who had been pushed out by the farmers were moving into their territory with their cattle. But it was just fascinating that, you know, they had so little, and I'm not saying that from a poverty, it's just that they had the clothes they wore, they had their spears and their weapons and the cooking pot, and they were able to build shelters for themselves. And there was water, and that notion of, you know, well, everything is provided, nature provides, everything is in this landscape. Now, I don't know how it is now, that's probably 10, 15 years ago. You know, everything is changing, and, you know, most governments don't support Indigenous lives and say, sorry, you have to move with the times and you have to move with technology, etc. But it was a wonderful experience. And then we did some ceremonies with other previous hunter-gatherers, but they were now settled. And that was great. And that was back to, you see that, well, once you settle and you're farming or whatever it is, then you're not as in tune with the landscape or in harmony with it as if you were a hunter-gatherer. And that is not to diss any farmers, because we all have to eat, and, you know, but it's just an interesting one.
I find, I mean, my experience is limited, but I met reindeer herders in Siberia at one point, a brief visit there, and people that have lived off the land either as nomads or as hunter-gatherers or whatever, it's a really tough life. If you're raised to it, you get it, but actually it's really tough. So as soon as the comforts that we all like begin to creep in and be available, you get a generation that grows up with more comfort, and they just don't want to go back to the bush. It's too hard for them. And so I found my romanticism of living in tune with nature and nature provides, it's in today's world, it's very hard to find. And I think if you found it today, you'd probably find a group of tourists there wanting to learn it, because there's so few now. That's probably an easier way to make money than actually hunting the game.
And the funny thing is, how do you contact them is by mobile phone. How do you need a mobile phone? How do you charge a mobile phone? You need access to power. Yeah. There's all that kind of stuff that you get soon as you get sucked into it. But I was lucky to have had the experience, you know, just very, very grateful for that.
It's good experience. I think everyone should have the opportunity to travel and see different cultures. It opens your eyes to what it means to be human, but also to kind of getting out of our narrow, self-centered. We can be quite ego-centered often as humans.
Very arrogant. So yeah, absolutely. So
what brought me to OBOD, you asked me earlier. So I've trained through the OBOD grades. It's been a very important part of my spiritual journey, and I'm very grateful. I'm grateful for this opportunity to share a little bit. Obviously, my journey is my journey, and that's the wonderful thing about the training course, is that everyone's journey is their own, and people connect in different ways. So you can probably see behind me there's a Celtic cross there. Yes. I am Christian. I have gone through some ups and downs in that faith. I was raised in an evangelical church. And so what brought me here, I guess, I went through many years being very, the youth and enthusiasm, the zeal of youth inspired me, and my faith was real to me at a young age. Have I lost you? Oh, no, there you go.
No.
Do you tell me if it stutters?
Yeah.
And so, all through the years that I was traveling and everything else, I was meeting other expats or other Christians, going to a church if there was one, that kind of thing. Slowly over my 20s and early 30s, I was slowly pushed to become more and more fundamentalist in my theology and the way I understood things, just because I was meeting with people like that. And when you're out with an African tribe or something for a while, and then you come back to the city and you go to church, because that's what I did, and the people there are white, and by the way, I'm using these names just as definition, no racism or anything, but the people there are similar color skin to myself, and They're all talking the same kind of Jesus language. Well, they're my people. That's what I am. And so I subconsciously began to take on some of the kind of fundamentalist, literalist interpretations of things without realizing it. And I mean, this even started in my youth by reading books. I was really into creationism. Genesis says God made the world in 7 days, several literal days. If you believe the Bible, then you've got to believe it as it is, because it's God's word, isn't it? So I didn't realize the impact of this, and it was fine in my early 20s. It kept me going. But to cut a long story short, I hit a point where I could no longer reconcile what I saw of the world with this fundamentalist worldview. And the issue for me, I mean, I could talk for hours about this and get into all kinds of debates with different people with different opinions, but the issue for me was the creation evolution debate. So everything I saw out in nature, and I spent a lot of time outdoors and out in nature, as I said, everything I saw there began to more and more line up with the scientific understanding of evolution. And yet everything my faith was teaching me and the people surrounding me was creationism. And it began to create this cognitive dissonance in my mind, which I tried to cover over and find arguments for several years, until eventually one day, due to a number of issues, as I look back, but at the time I wasn't aware of these different issues, it just kind of blew up inside me, and I had to find out what is the truth. And as I began to look at evidence, it was like the rug was pulled from under me. So if you have questions, do feel free to ask as I tell my story.
Annie McNeil says this: I'm in my first year with OBOD and I'm a Christian, still feeling out melding of the two. Thank you for sharing your story. Sometimes I feel a bit lost and alone. Well, Franny, I think, there are a number of members of the order who are Christians. So, and what's lovely about the order is that we welcome all faiths and none, and that you can weave your druidry into whatever spiritual path you come with into the order. So anyway, thank you for saying that.
And we can maybe a bit later on, we can talk a bit more about some of those aspects. That's fascinating. There are other people engaging and grappling with this this tension between different paths. So as I said, I felt the rug pulled out from under me, and I was like, right, I've got to find what the truth is here, because things aren't lining up. So somehow I came across a book called God Is Not Great by Christopher Hitchens, one of the new atheists. So I don't know what they call them now. At the time, they were calling them the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse. There was him, there was Richard Dawkins, Dan Dennett, I think, and Sam Harris, maybe. I don't know. There were these four who kind of started that new atheism, hardcore scientific materialism. And as I began to read their books and be like, right, I'm going to get to grips with what's really going on. Somehow I was at a stage in my faith where everything they said made sense, and everything I'd been taught to believe began to fall apart. And that was really, really unsettling. One of the most difficult times in my life, and I felt so alone in it. As a Christian, you're taught to, go to your elders, go to your pastor, go to someone else when you have struggles and difficulties. But when you're doubting the very core of your faith, it's very difficult to open up to people, because you're afraid that they will see you as a sinner or a backslider or all this kind of judgment. And I spent my life judging people. Are they in or out? Are they real believers or not? Subconsciously, there's a culture of that. And so I was terrified of telling anyone what was going on. I didn't tell my wife. She's a good, God-fearing, God-loving Christian, and I didn't want to, what I was struggling with, I didn't want it to worry her. And we were having babies and all kinds. It wasn't the right time. But as the rug was pulled out from under me, I had no foundation anymore. I built my life on this faith, and I'd felt close to God. I'd had times in my life when I'd really felt the presence of the Holy Spirit with me. So it's all gone now. It's all just a delusion, as Dawkins says. The whole it's all in our mind. It's just a delusion. What on earth am I doing in the world then? Where are my points of reference? It was a dark night of the soul, as we'll get into that in a sec. It was a hard time. As I began to grapple with that, I finally came to the point I was right, I am done with this. None of it holds together. And so I became a spiritual seeker. The atheist worldview held for about 2 years. And then I slowly began to see, because I'd already deconstructed my faith. And I mean, I went to depths of deconstruction. Nowadays, it's getting quite popular to talk about deconstruction. I was perhaps, it was happening to me before it became popular, so there weren't many internet forums to go on and talk to people about. But, you know, stuff gets ripped apart, like the story of Noah was a classic one to me. I'd been taught its literal truth. There was a literal flood that covered the whole earth, and God killed all other creatures except Noah and his family and the animals. But you look at the size of the ark, you look at how many animals were there, how much feed they would have needed. It's very hard to make it make sense literally. And so I was looking into all this kind of stuff. I was looking into then Babylonian myths, which preceded Noah, and Gilgamesh, Atrahasis, some of these other stories, which actually the Hebrews kind of took and adapted to make what's in the Bible today. I was like, oh, they've just plagiarized these other stories. So they're liars as well. So everyone's a liar. And I began to have this deep anger and resentment that everything I'd been taught was wrong and was a lie and everyone was deluded. However, when you've really deconstructed something, you then get very skeptical about anything else. So a couple of years of believing the atheists, I was just naturally applying the same kind of things to some of their arguments. And what I noticed, and please, if anyone listening is atheist, I have nothing against atheism as a philosophy and a worldview. But I began to see that these people that were really hardcore atheists were just as evangelic in their atheism as the people they were bashing in their Christianity. And they weren't content to just say, actually, this is the truth as we see it, make your own choice. They really wanted to convert everyone to their way of seeing things. I was like, hang on a minute, when you're that desperate to convince everyone that your point of view is right, I'm hearing warning bells now. And so the one piece of evidence that I could never reconcile, because they always talk about the scientific evidence, but actually a lot of what I was reading at that time was just bashing. It's like they hadn't dealt with their own Christian past. And the one evidence that I thought they never dealt with was the fact that all around the world, there is no culture, there is no people that is naturally atheistic. Every human culture has some belief in something beyond the material, whether it's spirits, whether it's ancestors, ghosts, God, polytheistic gods and goddesses, or all this kind of thing. They all have something that transcends the natural physical world. So I couldn't reconcile that. So slowly the holes in their worldview fell apart as well. And I just found myself, okay, the rug's been pulled out from me. Right now I'm an atheist. Oh, the rug's been pulled out from atheist. What? Where am I? What am I? This is, it was a really tough time.
It must have been horrific. I mean, to have one rug pulled and then to have a second one, and then it's like you're floating around with no rudder, no map, and
where am I and what am I doing? And is suicide the way out? I didn't seriously consider that, but it goes through your mind. Do I just live for pleasure, or just live for my family, or do I just live a lie and pretend I believe something that I don't? I mean, there was all these things going on in my mind trying to. Anyway, I became a spiritual seeker, and there are places where spiritual seekers are connecting, and people looking for truth are connecting. So I was desperate to find out what is the real truth now. And that was when I came across the world, because once you've broken out of the fear and the restriction of a belief system, which for me was evangelical Christianity, once you break out of that, you then don't have the fear that held you in, because at least some of it for myself, it was fear-based. If you do the wrong thing, then you're going to go to hell. So be careful. Once that fear's gone, you're like, right, I'm going to look into anything and everything. So I really just started looking everywhere for answers, and that's when I came across the world of neo-paganism, magic, all this kind of stuff that we've been told not to deal with. Because it's all dodgy and evil. I found that there was a world of people there who actually weren't all devil worshippers, and actually there's some quite normal and rational people. And so this was a whole new world to me, to discover that. I have to add here, in my early life, I was quite drawn to meditation. I absolutely love sitting in silence, and there's something about that that's always attracted me. And of course, that was something that was never emphasized in the tradition of Christianity that I grew up in. I was always told it's dodgy. If you empty your mind, the devil's going to come and fill it. That was the kind of state answer. So don't do that. It's all dodgy. It's all wrong. It's all from the East. Those weird, demon worshipping cultures out in the East. So although I had a natural interest in it, and I'd heard of some of the teachers of Christian meditation in my teenage years, I'd read a couple of books, kind of squashed because the culture I was in didn't accept that. Anyway, when I became a spiritual seeker, of course, that's where I went for looking for answers. So all that I'm told is wrong and dodgy. I'm going to start examining it and actually finding out. And I never, I didn't want to ally my soul with the devil or get into evil or hurting people or anything like that. That wasn't what I was after. I was just looking for truth. So I looked into world religions. I studied Buddhism and Hinduism and pre-Hindu philosophy, looked into the Western magical tradition, and came across, I'm trying to think when the first book I may have read that was about this was The Druid Shaman by Danu Forrest, just a little book that talks about basically teaching a few techniques of visualization. So I think she's got a few guided journeys. It's years since I read it, so correct me if I'm wrong. And I read this and I was like, oh, I thought meditation was emptying your mind. This is filling your mind with an image and then actually entering into it like a dream. That sounds cool. I'm going to try that. So I tried that and found very quickly that I mean, I've always had a good imagination. I was always into reading fantasy books and, Tolkien and all these things. So it felt like, oh, this is amazing. I can actually enter this imaginary place, but have real experiences. So that really drew me into that. And yeah, I just explored. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know what was leading me, but we talk about synchronicity. I think in Jungian psychology, we talk about synchronicities. Little things would happen at just the right time. The right book would arrive on Amazon suggestion list, or whatever. Some thought would come, and then you'd look it up and be led in the right direction. And I really experienced that several times. So I remember hearing a podcast, and the guy was interviewing someone, and this person, he said he's a druid chief. And I go, what? They don't really exist today, do they? As I listened to this podcast. And then, of course, the eloquent tones of Philip Cargon in this interview. And it just, I played fantasy role-playing games, and I'm very into computer games. And so I was aware of the druid archetype of, someone with the animals and the spirit animals following them or whatever in the games. But I didn't actually think there were people that kind of identified with this. And it just blew my mind. If Philip ever listens to this, thank you so much for your input over the years. But his accent was not at all what I imagined a druid accent to be. So that just intrigued me and blew my mind. But I didn't think more of it. This was amongst many other explorations I was doing. I came across something called Asatru, or Asatru. Yep. I'm not quite sure how you pronounce that. It's the Norse tradition. And that intrigued me because Tolkien really drew a lot from that. He drew a lot from, Beowulf, from the Norse traditions, from all kind of mythology to create Lord of the Rings and Middle-earth. And I found names in the Eddas, which are the writings that we have from that tradition. Some of the names that he uses in Lord of the Rings are from the Eddas, but they're also not necessarily the characters we think. So Gandalf, in the Eddas, there is a character called Gandalf, but he's a dwarf. He's not the wizard. Oh, okay. And I'm like, oh, you took the name, but not the character. So there's some interesting stuff there. And that began to draw me. I was like, okay, so this is just a joke. It's fantasy, it's a joke, but you can actually practice it as a religion, but not actually have to really believe it literally. That sounds pretty cool. I can make it up and do what I want. So for a while, I was reading the Eddas and trying to understand this a bit, and that was quite intriguing. but as I said, synchronicities happen. And I came across a group online. I don't want to say anything because I don't want to say anything bad about different groups, but the impression I got from this group online was that they were just as fundamentalist in their asatru as they had been in their Christianity. So they were Americans, they'd come out of a literalistic Christianity, and now they were having arguments on online forums about the exact interpretation of a word in the Eddas and whether it meant this or this and how you should obey it and follow it. And I'm like, isn't that why you left your religious Christianity? Why are you bringing that into the new thing? So that really put me off asatru. I was like, if joining this means getting into those things, I'm just not interested anymore. And especially when the Eddas were written down by Christian monks, it was kind of the end of the era of that pagan society, and the monks preserved the traditions as best they could. So how can you take that as literal scripture when it was stories, oral stories that got written down by Christians? I mean, there's so much room for error there. It can't possibly be literal. It's poetry, as we know. Anyway. So all this exploration, there were times I was just done with everything. There were other times I was driven to find out what is truth. And I was coming down a mountain. These are just little snapshots of what was going on at that time. I was coming down a mountain. I'd come into a gorge, which on the map looked like a path, but actually was a really steep gorge with several cliffs down it. And it was 1,000-meter descent. So I'd got about halfway down it, and then there was a big cliff. And it's like, to go back up 500 meters when it's already mid-afternoon and then get back onto that ridge, and then it's like a half day's trek back, that's not possible. So I'm going to keep pushing down. And there's something about being in that danger zone or whatever. I don't know, your brain goes into a liminal space, right. At least mine did that day. And in this kind of slightly fraught panic coming down the mountain, this thought came into my mind really clearly. Now, I'd been trained I was in a charismatic evangelical church growing up, and so we've been trained to listen to the voice of the Holy Spirit, listen to God speaking to you. This is a major part of our faith. And this, I mean, it wasn't an audible voice or anything. I'm not claiming that, but this thought came into my head, and it reminded me of this podcast I'd heard with Philip Calgon, and the voice in my head, it just said, that man's got a lot of wisdom. Listen to him. And I go, I'm an atheist. I'm a spiritual seeker. And God just spoke to me, but I don't believe in God. But I know deep down in my spirit, God's speaking to me, but I don't believe in you, God. What's going on here? Anyway, well, I find that quite funny.
It's wonderful. It's wonderful, yeah.
Okay, so this guy's got a lot of wisdom. Listen to him. Okay, so, I got down, and a few days later, look him up, found Druidcast, started listening to his talks on Druidcast, hadn't a clue what he was talking about. Really didn't make much sense at all. But I discovered this spirituality called Druidry, which he was the chief of OBOD at the time. And it's like, you don't have to believe anything. It's just a way of being in nature, but a way that's more spiritual and deeper than the materialistic way. And that really drew me. I was like, okay, I can explore this without having to be told what to believe or anything else. And I've always loved nature, so I think I should give this a go. So with great trepidation, I wrote to the office, and Stephanie responded to me, and I told her her story. And at this point, I'd looked into all kinds of stuff, so I was quite familiar with the major arcana of the tarot. And I said, I feel like what's happened to me is the tower, the tower card in the tarot. And pictures I've seen online of the tower card was this tower and lightning hitting it and two people falling out. I said, that's how I feel. Everything that I believed in my foundation has been destroyed. I don't know where I'm at. I'm interested in this course. And she wrote back a lovely letter. I said, I don't want to do any ritual because, I still have the fear of anything that sounded dodgy or satanic or all those inbuilt fears I had. I don't want to do any of that, but I'm interested to study this. Is that okay? And she wrote a lovely letter back and said, that sounds wonderful. And signed me up. So that's the long story of how I got into it.
Well, Ricky has a comment. You were talking about God speaking to you, but you don't believe in God. But does deity believe in you?
That's a great comment. You don't believe in God, but God believes in you.
So you joined the order then?
Yeah, I mean, I still hesitate. Am I a member? Am I not a member? Well, by doing the course, you're a member. So yes. I think signing my name up with some of the terminology is still not necessarily something that I want to do, or I'd be careful what I say to different people. I love all my Christian friends and family and everyone else, and don't want to offend them. But I have done the OBOD course, and it's been so helpful. Looking back, it feels like having my own personal spiritual director. And I say that as someone who is now training to be a spiritual director, to walk alongside others. The synchronicities that happen, as everyone is aware, the points where the course speaks to you at just the right moment, or the points where you really feel led in a certain way, and then you read the next lesson, and lo and behold, it's talking about exactly that thing you felt you should look into. Just incredible. So I went through the Bardic Grove and the Bardic Grade, and really rediscovered my love for poetry.
Oh, you have some poetry for us, have you?
Yes. So let's take a break, a poetic break.
I love this.
I get deep, so if I'm too focused, just say.
While you're looking for it, Ricky, again, I love the fact that we can embrace Druidry, spirituality, religion, philosophy, or whatever term and or belief system we're comfortable with. And I think that says it all.
It's wonderful, isn't it? No one's telling you what to believe or what not to. Let me just find. So I've got a couple of poems that reflect that period of the dark night that I went through. And I will read one to you. This one is called Terrible Dark Light, and it's actually written a bit later on when I began to see glimmerings of hope and direction. But it talks about some of the pain of the darkness of that time and how God or spirit or deity or whatever language you want to use came to me at just the right moment. So this is called Terrible Dark Light. I dwell in the darkness of your light, knowing that I am found in your unknowing. Here in this silence, you deafen me with your thunder, which is not there. I fought you through the years of your emptiness so real. You pulled yourself apart in me. All that remains is the empty fullness of mystery. But even mystery will be something. Your mystery is that you are nothing and everything, an empty presence so tangibly real. Shattered in the broken constructs of religion so sure, I kneel in collapse, knowing no more than breath. Now your breathing in me is the all. All now is gone to ashes and dust. A phoenix rises, invisible, pure. A nothing and everything, a non-existent spirit illumined by darkness, so empty and pure. The dead do not rise. I arise. The dark holds no light. Yet here beyond darkness and light, we are one.
Wow.
So that's really me grappling with a God I no longer exist in, who still meets me where I'm at, and the darkness and the light and the mystery and the unknowing, and somehow that's part of it. And it makes no rational.
Yes, the Greeks have a phrase, bidden or not bidden. This is the English version. Bidden or not bidden, God is present. And seemingly Carl Jung had that over his doorway. And I see Pat has put vocatus atque non vocatus Deus aderit, which I assume is the same thing in Latin. And that is really, really interesting. And I have that plaque in my house. It's a really, really interesting, I don't know, is it a paradox or whatever it is that, the Christian thing is, where two or three gathered in my name, there I am in their midst. But bidden or not bidden, spirit is present, deity is present, however you want to articulate it. I find that fascinating. Obviously, to the four men of the modern four horsemen will say that's a load of nonsense. But I think for so many people that makes so much sense. And assuring. And Franny says, she's the woman earlier who talked about being a Christian and a druid. That was beautiful. It hit so close to where I am spiritually. Thank you. Adrienne Weaver, wow, poignant and relatable. Please consider publishing this. And Pat says, it works for me because I think we're all a part of spirit, people, and all creation. Absolutely. So lots of response, lovely feeling with it. Wow, very precious and wonderful, Mark. Thank you humbly for sharing such soulful words and received most graciously, sir.
Oh, thank you.
So it's really, really powerful. Absolutely. And you know what? You read your poetry very well. Not all poets can do a good job of reading it. So I thought it was really, really engaging, whatever way you did it.
I've listened quite a lot to David White. Now, I don't repeat the phrase again and again like he does, but he's been a real inspiration to me. The way he is. I don't know if I read like him, but I like listening to him read. So
absolutely wonderful. Wonderful.
Yeah. So yeah, no, you can sense some of my pain and difficulty at that time, and the truth I found was not a truth. It was to transcend rationality and to realize that rationality is only a small part of our psyche. And that, that's the brilliant thing about the course's training is in some way it opens us up to mystery, to poetry, to story, to all these things which are not the Western rational way of seeing the world. So that's how that was really helpful to me.
And funny, we live in a rational world, and well, that seems to be the key. But music isn't rational, art and poetry isn't rational, nor is the stock market. It's based on confidence. Mm-hmm. What's rational about that? It's funny that that seems to be the gold standard, and yet actually no.
Yeah. And the cutting edge of science, as we understand it, the cutting edge of science is way beyond the rational now. It's all into weirdness. I'm not a scientist, I don't know, but somehow the cultural expression of the scientific worldview is very much stuck in that rationalism, and you have to explain everything rationally.
And it's very limited. I mean, rationality. I mean, I'm not against rationality. I mean, it helps, particularly if you have an irrational lunatic talking to you. But it very limits you. So it's to be able to go outside and beyond and enter into the unknown and the inexplicable and the mystery and the magic. Exactly. That's where creativity comes from.
And that's exactly, I mean, that's part of my journey back towards Christianity is to embrace Christianity in the mystical tradition. It's only in the last, I don't know, since the Enlightenment, I guess, that people have taken the Bible so literally as some people do today. Most of it, 2/3 of the Bible is stories, and people told stories because they spoke to the heart. It's not meant to be a literal truth. It's meant to inspire you in the way we know bards inspire people when they tell stories.
That's right.
And actually, I discovered in the Catholic tradition, which I think you have some small familiarity with. I mean,
yes,
the focus of a Catholic Mass. The amazing thing about COVID and Zoom is that you can attend events like this and see something you might never actually walk into. So I've been to some Catholic Masses, Orthodox Masses, all kinds of stuff. It's wonderful. And the focus of the Catholic Mass is the sacrament, the bread and the wine, which they say literally is the blood and body of Jesus. And I understand that now in the mystical sense, because I've been awakened to the transrational, the mystical element of faith, whereas I never would have got that before. I just thought those Catholics are deceived. It can't possibly be Jesus' actual blood and body. That's ridiculous.
My experience is the same. One of my big things was the notion of transubstantiation, because I think maybe I'm a Protestant at heart, which is consubstantiation, that the bread and wine are symbols. And I thought this is absolutely nonsense until I joined the order. And now I get it. Now I get it. That ability to transubstantiate. And people say, how can you do that? So, would you think of a wedding ring? What is it? It's a metal band, and it's a symbol. It's a symbol of your commitment and love for each other. But it transubstantiates when you lose it, or you take it off. What does that mean? Well, it's just a ring. No. It's not just a symbol. It's more. It transubstantiates into something real, and we transubstantiate lots of things from symbols into something that's real all the time, but we don't think about it.
Exactly. Yeah, that's great. That's cool. Are there any other comments, or shall I carry on with the next part?
Well, do you know what? There are so many comments that we won't have time to look at them. So what we do is afterwards look at them again. So apologies, unless there's a question. People are lots and lots of if we have transubstantiation, can we have
Don't get into the theological debates, or we'll never end.
Ricky is so mischievous. It's lovely. If we have transubstantiation, can we have cis-substantiation? The bugger all happens. Okay, I'd like an essay on that, Ricky, so please provide answers. All right, I think that's lovely. I just lovely. Carol says symbols are our mind's way of coping with feelings. Perhaps. Sorry, I'm still laughing. Ricky, how sorry are you? He says he's sorry. I'm not too sure how sorry he is. Sorry for making me laugh. I think it's funny. But anyway, continue while I calm down.
Yeah, I'll bring it back to the deep and serious now. Sorry, everyone.
Exactly.
Stop me when I get too serious again. So the other side, there's two sides to, I would say now I'm not a spiritual seeker. I have, even though I've not found literal truth again, I have found, I've come out of that period and I'm in a strong, solid place. And so the other side of what happened alongside the exploring other spiritualities was a rediscovery of Christianity, like I said. And this happened because I had I was reading books that used to speak to me with the new atheist lens of let's destroy it all, let's tear apart their arguments. I really had a deep anger. And, if I'd been meeting with you or a psychologist, they'd probably have taught me ways to deal with the anger better. But I had this anger about what I'd been brainwashed with. So I was just reading everything and ripping it apart in my mind. And so one day I picked up this book by an author called St. John of the Cross, who was a 15th century Christian Catholic mystic. And I was just flicking through, ready to destroy it like every other book I was reading, every other Christian book I was reading. And it was an old translation. It's not the modern one that I use now. But he was saying something, and it just spoke deep to me. He said, he's talking about the dark night of the soul. Now, I know in psychology and in many counseling and everything, it's a popular term, the dark night of the soul. Well, it was John of the Cross who kind of originally talked about this concept. And he talks about the different parts of the dark night. Now, in the Spanish, some people say a better translation is the obscure night, or the obscurity of darkness. So that's interesting to understand. But he said there's what he called a dark night of the senses, and this is where all our sensual comfort, so the things that we feel comfortable with, the nice beds and the nice food and what makes our life physically comfortable. He says there will come a time when you're really seeking God. Obviously, he's talking to monks in a monastery. There will come a time when all these comforts are stripped away from you, and you have to go beyond them. And as I read this phrase in his book, I remembered the years I'd spent traveling in Africa and elsewhere. I've had malaria times and I can count. I got to 10 and stopped counting. I've slept on little wooden beds made of sticks out in the middle of the desert, all kinds of stuff. So I really resonated. Yeah, I know. I mean, I've not suffered as much as many people in the world, so I'm not saying I'm anything special, but I've known a certain amount of suffering. Mm-hmm. And I resonated with what he said. So it kind of hooked me. Like I changed from being the atheist ripping apart what he's saying to going, oh yeah, I've experienced that. Okay, I know what you're talking about. And then he went on and he talked about the dark night of the spirit. So these are 2 stages, or there's actually 4 stages if you get into it, of the dark night of the soul. So he talks about the senses and then the spirit. And he says the dark night of the spirit is where all sense of the presence of God, divine closeness, feeling accepted and forgiven, all these things which we count as part of our relationship with God in many religions, but he's talking to Christians. All these senses are stripped away, and this is done by God, and it's to purify the soul so that we no longer want the things of God, even the sense of God's closeness. We no longer want that feeling, but we only want God for himself or itself or the unknown, whatever gender God is. God is transcending gender. But he talks about how everything is stripped away so that we can come to this purity of union, the soul's union with the divine. And I was just gobsmacked as I read this. I'd started reading this book that night, ready to rip it apart. And it spoke to me so deeply. It said, everything I've been through, these years of searching, these years of disbelief, atheism, not even able to pray, very struggling when I'm with my wife, when we go to church, all that struggle was necessary. It's part of the spiritual journey. And it was God's doing, or the doing of the divine, however you want to use the language. I went, oh, that's okay then. What I'm going through is okay. I'm sorry, Eimear, I've lost you. Are you still there? Yeah.
Yeah. We can hear you.
And this was a major turnaround. So on the one hand, I had Philip Cargom and the training of the course of the order, and on the other hand, I had this turnaround to understand that someone who really desires to know God will actually go through this purgation, and that I've not looked back since then. That was a point of going from despair to, okay, there is hope. There's something happening here, and I'm not in control. Whatever God is, I can no longer define God, but that's okay because God or the divine or the spirit is leading me and loves me so much to take me through this darkness in order to purify me, to make me into a better human and to make me into who I really should be and to be a blessing of God's presence in the world. And I was like, oh, I get it now. So, I mean, it's taken many years since then of growing in that, but this was a real turnaround. So I began to read the Christian mystics alongside. So I was still reading everything else. I was reading Buddhism and practicing meditation techniques from all traditions, practicing the visualization of the order's teaching and being out in nature and just kind of sitting with trees, this kind of thing. But it really began to push into the Christian mystics as well. And I realized that there's a whole tradition here that I've missed, and it resonates with who I am deep down and how I express myself spiritually as a contemplative, as a meditator. And you find writers like there's a guy called Meister Eckhart, century German mystic, and he was tried for heresy by the church because what he talked about was so far off. I think he died before his trial came, unfortunately. But he says things like, let me read rather than from memory. He says things like, if you think you know God, you don't, you're far away. Yeah. And you go, what? But theology and training and study and Bible reading, it's all about knowing God, isn't it? And these mystics are saying, if you think you can define the divine, you can't. You've missed the point. Anything that you pull down to a level that can be defined is not God. And the same is expressed in the Tao Te Ching of Taoism, which is a very interesting, deep book. And it says that the Tao that can be named is not the true Tao. And the concept applies to divinity. The God that can be named is not the true God. It's a limited form. So this led me to realize that the God I had believed in was a harsh, judgmental God. The kind of image that Dawkins sets up is not far from what was in my subconscious, which was the God waiting to punish me for any little bit of wrongdoing I did. Even though we say God is love, God's actually there, harshly waiting to punish you. A God that's so loving that he's willing to believe in him. I mean, that sounded a bit more like a dictator. And I began to realize that these mystics talked about a God of love, a God who loves, full of mercy and full of grace, and loves because that's in God's very nature, not because he only does it when people deserve it or not. And it's like that. And that's the message of the Gospels. That's what Jesus did. He blessed the sinners. It was the Pharisees that had a problem with him because they thought they were all pious and holy and knew what God wanted. He was with whoever and just showing love and mercy and blessing to them. And so I slowly began to realize my form of Christianity was wrong. My view of God was wrong. It's all been completely stripped away and destroyed. And now I can't even define what God is anymore. I can't define what it means to be a Christian. But I know that Christ is in me. And the final part, then I'll give another break for comments or whatever, is just that through...
Go on.
No, sorry. Through the training and the visualizations that I absolutely love doing and path working kind of stuff, a number of times I was really surprised to meet Christ or to be met by Christ in the inner grove. And this kind of blew me away. The first time it happened, I was doing some visualization where you go to the different planetary powers. I think it was a Kabbalistic style thing, and I, in this vision, flew to this planetary power and to get some. I can't even remember what the purpose of this visualization was. And as I approached this great spiritual power, I saw Christ there in my visualization. Sorry, what are you doing here? This is basically an occult ritual that I'm doing here, and you're here, and you're not telling me off. What are you doing here? And I just sensed Christ say, "Don't worry, you belong to me." Didn't say stop, didn't say whatever. And that, okay, right, I'll carry on then. And this happened a few times. I wrote a thing towards the end of the Bardic grade where I posted it on the forums, actually. It's like, I decided I wanted to meet with Merlin, the spirit of the forest, the kind of the wild Merlin wilt, or however you pronounce it, as the archetype of who I'd been as a child. So I'm going to do a visualization, and I'd like to meet with Merlin. And I imagined him, and there he was, sat there, and felt his wildness. And then round the campfire in my visualization, Christ came and sat down. And they just spoke like old wise friends. And I was like, "I'm sorry, Jesus, but you're supposed to be judging me now for doing something that's definitely not right. Why are you here with me, showing your loving presence and showing that it's okay and that you're happy for me to explore this?" So it blew apart the kind of fear and all this kind of thing, but it also made me realize I've never rejected Christ. There are people who lose their faith and they deliberately do a ritual to reverse their baptism and reject. Mm-hmm. And if that's the choice they make, fine. But I'd never been brought to that point. And Christ is with me. And I use this language very carefully now. The Christ, some people talk about the cosmic Christ, the Christ who is alive and living and active in the world today, perhaps in juxtaposition with the historical Christ. We still have some arguments against or for. Are the Gospels literal? Are they stories about this? It doesn't matter. I know the living presence of Christ, you might call it something differently, lives in me and loves me and wants his character to come out more and more in me and bless others around me. So that was a major part of that. And to round off this part of my spiritual exploration, it's changed the way I approach people. It's helped me to actually love people. I was always judging them before because they weren't Christian, or they weren't quite my kind of Christian, or they didn't quite believe the right doctrine of predestination or the second coming and exactly how that will work. So therefore they're wrong and heretics. And now this meeting the loving presence of the living Christ and knowing that he dwells in me, I find I can love my neighbor, whether they're Muslim, whether they're Hindu, whether they're atheist, whether they're Druid, pagan, whatever. It doesn't matter because God is loving them. God made them. God is loving them. And I find that. My wife says, you're a better person for this difficult time you've gone through. I say, well, if that's the evidence I need, then yeah. So,
and if she can say it, that's absolutely wonderful, isn't it?
It is. I mean, yeah.
That is brilliant. There are lots of comments. One, you said you started reading Christian mystics, and Sean asks, have you come across, well, he mentions Anam Cara, but by John O'Donoghue. He's written, he was a Catholic priest who, I suppose, a Celtic Christian mystic. Anam Cara, he's written Eternal Echoes, Connemara Blues, Benedictus. Have you come across him?
Hello, sorry, it stuttered. Are we back?
Sorry, did you lose me there?
So something about John O'Donoghue, Anam Cara, and then the internet stuttered.
Oh, okay. Just have you come across him? Somebody, Sean has asked that question.
Yeah, I've not read lots of his stuff, but I find him very inspiring. Yeah.
And then there's John Moriarty. Pat talks, the perfect Christian mystic for Druids, a bit mad-like, but he sees the whole world vibrating with divinity. Have you come across John Moriarty?
No, I'll have to write these names down.
You can find him giving talks on YouTube. He passed a number of years ago, a great loss as well. And he's written Invoking Ireland. I've forgotten the others. Sometimes difficult to grasp, but a brilliant mind and incredibly spiritual person, but really, really connected with his landscape. It's just beautiful to hear him talk about his landscape. And then Carol says, is not the dark night of the spirit our widening of our concept of the God, to no longer limit it to our humanity, but to let it expand almost beyond our comprehension? And I think you've already spoken to that, haven't you?
Yeah. Responding to that, there's another quote by Meister Eckhart. He says, "As long as we have and know who God is, we don't. We're far away. So can you let your notions die? This is the smallest death the soul must go through before perfection." And it's exactly that. It's letting go of those limiting notions to be opened up to something bigger. And it's not, the people I've talked to who have experienced a similar journey to my own, it's not been anyone's desire to go through this. If you want to go through a dark night, you won't. I mean, I regularly talk to my teacher who's a Carmelite monk, and he said he's had monks in his monastery their whole lives who've never gone through it. They're ardently praying, thinking it's some spiritual achievement. And I'm like, if it's anything like what I went through, it's not an achievement. It's a horrendous time. It's really tough. Don't aspire to it, but if you go through it, know that you're not alone.
Yes. And Poppy says, there is no God who sits up in the clouds and waited to strike us when we don't follow someone who claims he speaks for God. That's an interesting one, yes. Okay, so Franny says, I'm not nearly the scholar you are. Could you please recommend a few books to start with? Maybe an easier read to begin.
Gosh, I don't know where to start. Recommending.
Sometimes it's a hard one. Anyway, she's on YouTube rather than Facebook. So maybe you could put it into the Facebook chat afterwards. After this.
Yeah. To reflect.
Facebook channel, and then you'd be able to. If Mark later will put in some references for you. Vincent, who's also a Christian Druid, I had the same experience, Mark. Christ was the first person in my inner grove. And that's really, really powerful.
Amazing.
And Pat very reverently says, typical Christ, always gate crashing. And Hannah says, Jesus never wanted Christianity to be the way it is, I don't think. So.
Yeah. I often say it would be a great thought experiment to think of the founders of the world's religions today, and if they came back today and saw what had been done in their name, would they even recognize it?
Wow, absolutely. It's there's loads. So Owen, I suspect you will adore John O'Donoghue and Moriarty if you haven't come. Okay. What he describes is a balm to the heart and a spark to the horizon. What a lovely expression, Owen. Thank you. Catherine says, thank you for bringing Christianity to the conversation. I think it's important to point out that there are Christian Druids too. I'm a convert to Eastern Orthodox. Glad to hear this conversation. Absolutely.
Yeah, I've come across a few people who are very into nature spirituality, but not wanting to deny Christianity either. And they find there's something in Eastern Orthodox theology which is more open to nature and also to the merciful and loving side of God rather than the harsh judgmental side. We could get into the theology of that. There's a big split happened at the time of St. Augustine, and it's quite a famous heresy. I'm sure people here are aware of it. So a guy called Pelagius, whose real name was Morgan of Wales, and as I understand it, their debate was the deepest thing in a human. Is it of God or is it of sin? And Augustine was like, we're depraved. Now, please correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not a theological scholar. But Augustine's view is we are depraved. I mean, he lived a wild life before he became a convert.
Lord, make me chaste, but not yet. Wasn't it?
Whereas Pelagius said, no, the deepest thing in a human is of God and divine and is good. We are led into sin. We are tempted to sin. We're all sinful in some way, but the deepest thing in us is of God. And that's what I understand the heart of that debate. And many people that are engaging with Celtic Christianity or with nature spirituality in collaboration with Christianity are finding the Eastern Orthodox Church wasn't even part of this debate, so it never even affected them. So they're much more online with it.
And we have, I don't know how to, Mifiriol Eremeticus, I don't know if I'm pronouncing your name. He's Eastern Orthodox as well. And there's an Irish connection with Pelagius. They say he was Irish.
Okay.
And he who travels far or something like that. And I know Augustine chased him and got him in, I think, Jerusalem. And that's where he met his demise, wasn't it? Pelagius.
I don't know too much about him. I just know he
questioned the notion of original sin as well. So,
and it's one of the difficulties when you are a Christian or a believer in any religious system. I ultimately, and especially with my experience now, I go back to Christ. The closest we have is the Gospels and what Christ did there was loving and kind. He healed the sick, he raised the dead. Whether that was literal or not, I don't know. He blessed people, and he himself came back from the dead. So that's what we have. And yet somehow, but because I'm a Christian, I'm forced to accept the decision of Augustine, who was several hundred years later, or the discussion of church councils thousands of years later. Like, why must I believe what those people said and the decisions they made? My Lord is Christ, not all these other people. So there's a really interesting thing there.
That's right, absolutely. And I know, being brought up as a Roman Catholic, I used to question, and my mother would say, "You don't question. Catholics don't question, okay? Protestants do, and look where it gets you. Loads of Protestant churches where there's only one Roman Catholic church, and the problem is solved."
Right.
I speak facetiously, should I say, or tongue in cheek, and she would say, "Greater than you and wiser have accepted, so don't ask." And what an awful thing it is not to ask questions and not to actually go back to the message of Christ. And when you look at the examples from his life, you think, this guy was fine. And he was human too, because he cursed the fig tree when it didn't produce fruit. So I always find that really reassuring when I'm going off on one, that he Christ is not alone. But that, the humanity of him, and how that message gets so diluted with politics and the battle for rightness and all of that, and I suppose power among the various churches.
So can I turn the questions back to you, Eimear, or at least one? People who've been through a journey similar to mine feel in a very difficult place. I mean, if some of my Christian friends watch this, they may be very troubled by some of the language even that we're using. Because of that fear and worry of the devil and all this kind of thing. And, we walk a line, I walk a line now, which to Christians can sound very pagan. To a lot of pagans in the pagan community, it sounds too Christian because a lot of them have issues. There's all the witch trials, the burning times, all this history, which you can also get caught up in and find yourself one side or the other in some of these difficult times in history. How do you feel as leader of a Druid order, knowing that there are Christians who have come through this? There are groups on Facebook now exploring the connections between Christianity and Druidry. And then taking it beyond there, obviously OBOD is an open place, but there are also people exploring Christo-paganism, which is a deliberate blend of more elements, all kinds of stuff. I mean, what would be your response to that?
Wonderful. Because it allows... it's like, do you believe in God? And it's like, well, no, you don't believe in God. You know God because you've experienced deity, you've experienced spirit, you've experienced Christ in your grove. So I won't ask you, do you believe in Jesus? Because it's that knowing. So people ask me, do I believe in God? No, I don't. It's what I know. It's what I've experienced. And that is all I can know. And that is all I can. So what I know is not what you know. And what you know is not what I know. And that each of us have our own experience. And I would encourage anybody to explore whatever spiritual paths are of interest or of importance to them. And I think the wonderful way to do is to be able to integrate the various traditions. So yeah, Christo-pagans, pagan Christians, whatever it is, I have no issue. And the thing is, even though we may have been damaged by our the religions from our culture and backgrounds, and many people have. And for some, they've left it and said, okay, never again. I never want to go back to that. That's their hurt. And it would be lovely to be able to heal the hurt and not say, oh, yes, I want you to go back to that, but to be able to let it go and not be so reactive about it. Because, when we hold pain, it continues to cause us pain. But to be able to say, okay, that's where I was. So, for example, I was a Roman Catholic and I left the church. I don't regard myself as a Christian, but I haven't cut ties with Christian values in a sense when you think of Christ's message. No, but certainly with the Catholic Church and all the power and the shenanigans. And I remember when I was defecting, writing to the bishop and saying the Catholic Church does not and never has wanted women like me in there. So I've never felt I belong. So it's the organization I left. So, for example, when we have our ceremonies here in my grove here in Kilkenny, the space is open. I'm also a priestess in the Fellowship of Isis, which is a multi-faith organization as well. I allow anybody, it doesn't matter whether you're a druid, priestess, it doesn't matter whether you've to call on spirit from any tradition. People are free. So I have no issue with that because we're not talking about whose is the right one. Is my grove the one true grove, or is my grove higher than yours? It's not important. And I would encourage people to heal from the pain of that past piece, to be able to let the pain go and then practice your spirituality and then allow others to practice theirs. I remember I found the word pagan very heavily loaded when I joined the order first. I was not comfortable with the word. And I think it was like, well, pagans worship false gods or they believe in nothing and pagans are going to go to hell, because I was brought up very much with the concept of hell. And it took me a number of years, just gradually, losing the fear of, whatever's going to come from behind me and come down on me. So I am a pagan and I'm not, and I weave my way in. So I'm not defined by it, but I'm comfortable with it. And I see it as a very broad brush because I don't know actually what is a pagan, because it's so broad. But it's to allow people explore their spiritual path, however it is, without condemning somebody else and not reacting to somebody else's Christianity or reacting to somebody else's paganism or their Buddhism or whatever as a druid. It's about allowing people. And that's what we encourage. And so many people say to me, why did you join the order? Why OBOD particularly? It's because of that diversity and that freedom to practice and explore the course as you see fit. And it's not a perfect course. There will be things that you will come up with that you reach an edge, whether it's around heteronormativity of it, and you talk about the god and the goddess, that might drive you cracked, or the Bealtaine ceremony, or some reference to Christ, or some Christian reference, or whatever it is. And it's about meeting that edge and saying, okay, how do I make sense of this for me? All it is it's a taster. The teachings are a scaffold for which to build your own druidic practice. However that is, nothing is cast in stone. There are no tablets of right and wrong. And to welcome an edge. So if you meet an edge and something that really jars with you, explore that and what can you learn from it? Because you are free to become the druid that you're meant to be. There's no right or wrong. And we can all stand in circle and have a ritual and share it. And it's about welcoming the edge, because I think we can learn from things like that. I had edges, there wasn't enough of the Irish stories. There were a lot of Welsh ones. I'm not angry that there were Welsh ones. I didn't think that they were excluding me. So I thought I have to go and find my stories, mythology from my landscape before I engage with the Welsh ones. That was all. And then it just made me explore more and I'm still very, very curious, and I still know feck all. And it's like there's that constant curiosity and fascination for story and myth and so much more to learn. And it's just allowing people to be. But I suppose it's when you're not reactive, it's just, there's so much more peace.
Yeah. And that's been a wonderful thing for me, like the peace prayer, which is you're taught very early on. absolutely, 100% can be Christian, can be Buddhist, can be whatever. I mean, praying for peace, I've made it part of my daily prayer time, and it changes your view of the world, because you then go about your daily business and wish for peace. So I love the image you just had of scaffolding. I've come to the conclusion in my own explorations that any religion is like a scaffolding. The point is that the building grows up inside it, and then the scaffolding comes off. And
That's
so
right.
often, particularly, what restricted me, it was, we make everything about the scaffolding and the structure and the doctrine and the right thing, and really we should be helping people grow into who they are and into how they relate to God or the divine or whatever.
Absolutely. Pat says it's the worst are your walking boots, not the journey. I think that's so true. Stephanie says, agrees so much. There are many things in the course that I skip because it's not for me. There is no anger or discomfort with that. That is how it is with anything. We get to choose how we want to live and what we want to believe. There's no need to be reactive over someone else's beliefs. I remember when I was doing psychology in university, there were certain, like cognitive psychology never interested me. There were certain parts of psychology, but I had to do it. I had to do it because I had to study for the exams to do it. And where I would have wanted to spend more, and other aspects of psychology that were far more interesting, but I had to do it all. With the teachings, with the order, you don't. You know, it's that, here it is, and if it feels right for you, if you do it, and if you don't, that's okay. And you're not a bad druid or an imperfect druid or whatever it is. And they're so broad. How can you do everything? When you think of the reading lists, huge. You know, you could devote your whole life to the study of druidry. And I mean, when you think of, I suppose, certain religious scholars from various traditions go into monasteries or maybe could do groves and devote their life to learning. Which I like that idea, but I also want to live outside as well. So, and I like the community part of it. Poppy says, after searching many paths, I know this. All faiths and religions and spiritual paths serve a purpose for someone because we are all on different paths. That is why we need all the paths. Every person has their own time of going back to the light. The paths may be different, but the light we go towards is one. Sam says, I think the problem is the wording as in belief in God and or knowing God are somewhat contradictory or furnishing division. It affords an avenue of rejection of something they have not fully understood or explored. Our souls are all at different stages of evolution. Yeah. So Sean says the word pagan word heavily loaded. I've lost that loading now, Sean. It's just it no longer has that. I'm at ease with the word. Having, I suppose, met so many pagans, and it's like, well, all of the stereotypes. You know, you believe in nothing. You worship false gods. Neither are true, and they're both contradictory. And it's like, well, that's no relevance. It's just a word. Terrell says, a quote I like, religion is for people who are afraid of going to hell. Spirituality is for those who've already been there. From Vine Deloria Jr. I'm not so sure about that. I think I'm not against religion. You know, I'm not so sure because I don't know if all religions have the notion of hell. So
there can be a sense where you can follow the form of a religion mechanistically, or just because you do the form, and that's okay for a lot of people. That satisfies them, and that's part of their belief and their life. And then some people are moved into spirituality, but not necessarily everyone. Otherwise, you wouldn't have books like John of the Cross's massive great tome talking about the spiritual life or whatever. It's that there is a deepening that happens when you go. So that's not to say spirituality isn't for everyone, but it's a different thing. At least in my own life, I never really knew what spirituality was. So it's something to do with the spirit. Okay, God is spirit, so it must be something like that. But it never made sense until this purgation of the dark night, and then the kind of spiritual awakening.
Wonderful. Yeah, Sarv says pagan boasts its core etymology in the roots of the meaning of the sacred land. Yes. And then Pat says, and I know this, religion is from ligare, to bind. It just means the shared set of values that holds community together. spirituality is personal and religion is communal. Well, it's interesting when you have a ritual. There's a binding there. We do. We're in circle. We create that sacred space, sacred time. We talk about that, and we if it's in a group, it's as a community and share values. Which I find that notion is a softer way than the thing. That thing about religion being dogmatic and a set of rules. Salve wants, can you mention the name of that book? It's the one by John of the Cross. What's the title of the book?
Oh, I mean, this is the collected works. So John of the Cross. The
collected works
of John of the Cross. I mean, it's massive. You probably will get very bogged down, and he's very repetitive. So his famous one is Dark Night of the Soul. The one which actually talks more about the Dark Night of the Soul is the one called Ascent of Mount Carmel, which is kind of the Ascent of Mount Carmel.
Oh, okay. Yes, I heard that last sentence. Okay. And Mir Furiol, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Is I'd be proud to be called a Christo-pagan. Great. So it's that space for everybody to be who they are. And
so there's some interesting discussions that we have. I mean, there's a small group of people interested in this kind of Christianity mixed with nature spirituality, Druidry. And we're hopefully going to start meeting on Zoom every so often to discuss, because there are big issues, and there's the fear of the community you've come from, of Christianity, who many loving people, but are very worried that you're going to hell now, or that you're doing, dancing around campfires naked at midnight to the devil, or sacrificing children, all the fear of the unknown, which you're nodding reassures me that that's not the case. Not some deep advanced grade, like 20 grades.
No. My children are still alive, and we like our robes. That doesn't mean you get, that you can't be skyclad either. But we tend to have our rituals in robes. But midnight ceremony.
It's good to deal with those fear. The fear is a major thing, and to talk about some of the issues. And this little insight I'm indebted to a friend called Sean. It may be Sean who's on here, I don't know. Sean Sanford Beck, who wrote a little book called Christian Animism, where he's exploring an animistic view of the world, but one that's compatible with Christianity. And he makes a distinction between our cosmology and our theology. And he says a lot of misunderstanding, especially from Christians, is due to a confusion of cosmology and theology. So just to make that clear what he's talking about, as I understand it, our cosmology is how we see the world and the beings around us, the creatures, the material realm. And our theology is how we relate to the divine or to God or to the gods or whatever. And so if you understand this distinction, like some of the stuff that Christians are worried about when you begin to explore nature spirituality is the fact that we've come from a materialistic culture, and everything around us is dead and inert and just there as resources for us to use. And so there's actually a kind of fear of engaging with a tree as a living being and respecting it, even if you do cut it down for wood, at least honoring the life it's lived. So there's an innate fear there, but that has no say on what you believe about God or not. It's about what you believe about the world. And a lot of human cultures have a much more animistic or spirit-infused view of the world than our Western culture does. Mm-hmm. But then when you come to your theology, that's what you believe or what you've experienced, in my case, about God, or how the inexplicable mystery of the unknown divine resonates with you and how you engage with that. So for myself, that is Christ-centered, Christ-focused, and I understand the Christian worldview from a more mystical point of view, but Christ is the theology, the center there. For example, if you take the God and Goddess, as you mentioned recently, which I think is a fairly key doctrine or not doctrine, whatever the word is, a fairly key belief in Wicca particularly, and that more side of the spectrum, then you are honoring the God and the Goddess, so a dual, I don't even know what the word is, monotheism, duotheism, yes. A duality of the divine. So therefore, it would be very difficult to be a Christian and believe in the God and Goddess in a literal, or not literal, in an exact way, because the Christianity is about the Trinity. So how do you reconcile the theology there? There's a lot harder work to do there. Whereas you can have a spirit-filled cosmology but still be Christian. And then for me, this has been very helpful in understanding the two things. And of course, I honor and respect people like you who are focused on another divinity and wish you blessing. It's different to my theology, but we're all in this world together, and it's better that we share and help each other than that we're at war like we've been through most of history.
Yeah, and Poppy says the goddess is honoured in the Virgin Mary, and that would be very much I suppose, Catholic thing, Roman Catholic thing. But the thing is that even within those who are polytheist, or people have different affinities with different deities. So it's like, you may say, well, I work with Hecate, and somebody works with the Morrigan, and somebody with Ariadne, or Rhiannon, or whatever. And within that, people will say, well, actually, no, it shouldn't be Rhiannon. It should be Arianrod. She's far more blah, blah. It's like, or no, it should be Corydon. It's like, well, it's like, no, we don't. I never hear conversations like that. It's, what are you drawn to? And it's that being able to respect people. It's a bit like food. We go for a meal, and we there's a menu, and we choose different things, and what we have shared bread together, in communion or companionship. And it's about allowing, we all choose, and we've really shared a good meal together. And that's what, I suppose, within the order, coming to a ceremony, is that we are sharing that. There'll be different things that will resonate with us, with different people, but that we still have the common values of fellowship and honouring of nature, and of being of service and responsibility and honouring the land. That is enough to keep us. And that I never feel that I have to say, I respect you because you're a Christian, and I respect so-and-so because they're this, because it's like, for me, it's a given. Yeah. And I'm always curious about other people's theology, because I find it really, really interesting. So I suppose, yeah. So there's Mary Magdalene as well. Yes, she's. There are many, many great followers of Mary Magdalene. And
if you go deeper into the Gnostic, which is around the same time as the early church, the Gnostic interpretations of Jesus and the different spirits and stuff, they have Sophia, the divine wisdom.
That's right. Yes, and she's mentioned here.
She's in the Old Testament, and then kind of touches in the Bible that we have, but is really present in the Gnostic writings, and that's very interesting. Feminine aspect of the Godhead, however you understand that.
Absolutely. So Nikki says, this is such a wonderful talk. Thank you. It's so helpful and illuminates what I have gone through, from high Anglicanism as a child to charismatic Christian fundamentalist as a teenager to Hedwig and Druid in my early 20s. That dark night of the soul really speaks to me. I have found that Celtic Christianity, but seen through a more Arthurian lens, if that makes any sense, has helped me. I find my solace in nature, and that love exists as I weave Druidry and a fairy path. Thank you for that, Nikki. That's just wonderful. And Salve says, I'd value a cordial exchange with you, Mark, at an appropriate time, or indeed with said Zoom group. So she's on Facebook there. Yeah,
very happy. I think we're going to put a notice on the Christian Druid Path section of the OBOD website, on the forums there. We'll put a notice inviting people, because there is a Facebook group, but not everyone's on Facebook. So if you're interested in these discussions, please do get in touch. I'm not in charge of that, but I'm saying the people that are in charge of that, we're talking about that.
Great, thank you. And Pat says, I always liked Thecla in the Gnostic Gospels. She wouldn't marry this lad, so they threw her to the lions. But they were lionesses, and they wouldn't hurt her. That's great. So wonderful. So have you got a third part to your or have we got? Are we doing a poet break? A poem break, a poetry break.
Let me just say one more thing about my spiritual journey, just to give balance to this as well. Obviously, as a psychologist, you might say that all my experiences were just dealing with my unconscious. Like, did I actually meet with Christ or not? I believe I did, but
I would not question that for one moment. You tell me you met Christ, you met Christ.
I will say that there are a couple of times in kind of inner visualization where I sensed the presence, more than just an imagination, the presence of one of the Celtic deities or Celtic goddesses. And this happened with two of them over several years. And both times something in me didn't feel comfortable. And so I wasn't cursing them, go away, leave me alone, or anything like that. I was just, thank you very much. I'm not interested at this time in an exchange with you. I appreciate your legends and your stories. They really inspire me, but I'm not interested in something closer. So there was that deliberate decision that I belong to Christ, and I can respect other things, but I'm not going to enter into partnership. So that's just to bring balance. It wasn't only Christ that met me. I have experienced other whatever you want to call them.
And so you've chosen who resonates with you. Okay.
Well, I mean, yeah, deep down, knowing that that's my choice in life. And anyway,
that's what's important. So it's wonderful to have a conversation like this.
This is called The Spiritual Journey, and it's kind of resume of my walk. The spiritual journey. So far I have walked, and every step was necessary to bring me to this place of union, of all and of nothing. Looking back, I see encounters, powers, hardships, great joys, and places I could have stopped and rested forever. Yet onward my feet led me to that place I now stand, empty and yet so full in utter simplicity of the one. So far I have travelled, and yet it's as though I have not moved. I am still me, and my thoughts still come to me as they did in childhood. So far and yet so near, this place I now stand has a view I would never have imagined from where I set off from home all those years ago. Now here I stand at peace, with my true self and with the mystery, and I am close to the sky, embraced by the one, my nothing, my all. Thank you.
It's beautiful. That is beautiful. And standing, having come to this place, standing strong, it's just absolutely beautiful. Welcome to it.
Thank you. And I feel a sense of compassion and wanting to help others who are, wanting. I'm training as a spiritual director, mostly just because I've had a few interactions with spiritual directors late on in my journey. I desperately needed them in that hard time, but maybe it was right that I didn't have that in those hard times. And rather than the judgment that I feared, especially from Christian spiritual directors, the response I've had from these mature, they're mostly monks or people in the religious life, is, oh, that's wonderful what you've been through. That's wonderful. I can really see the hand of God at work. And so this has really inspired me. I want to be that loving person who can walk alongside others and help them wherever they're at, wherever they're going.
It's beautiful. Ricky says your poem has echoes of Paulo Coelho.
Okay.
Have you read him?
The Alchemist. Yeah. I read him many years ago, so maybe it was a subconscious drawing from
him. So this has been helpful and healing. This is from Lisa. Thank you so very much, Marc and Eimear and friends. Wonderful and tolerant. And in a sense, I don't feel tolerant. It's almost like having this conversation for me doesn't require any tolerance. It's around acceptance, or it just is.
There's something beyond tolerance. Is like, well, I tolerate what you're doing even though I don't like it, and you tolerate me. There's a kind of hardness there, isn't there? Whereas there's something different in these kind of exchanges.
Yeah, and they're fascinating. So it's so much to learn from them.
I'm just looking if there's one more poem that might be useful.
And Lisa means loving all. Yes, Lisa. I mean, I think that's, yeah, that goes much closer to the nub of the whole thing, is loving all.
I can read a poem I wrote called Simply Human, and it somehow embraces this kind of loving and acceptance of all of us. Sorry, I'm drying up here. So this is called Simply Human. Here on this sacred high street, I notice that people from St. Mary's something sepulchre don't mix with the people from Christ's own church just down there. And the something mosque on this corner here, though proclaiming the Ummah, doesn't agree with the other people's prayers who face Mecca over there. It strikes me that phylactery head on the roadside here won't accept his fellow suffering Jew who sees Torah more culturally. What are we all proclaiming? We don't live up to our ideologies, and I really don't know if our ideologies live up to us. I think of each one's symbols, designed to unite. Do they actually divide? When this cross and that star, or this crescent, do not unify in oneness the belief of their people, the oneness that they promote, is it actually a lie? Then I consider symbols designed to unite. Simple symbols. What's the most natural of symbols? How about a rock? Not too large, but its circumference wide enough for me to lay my hands here beside your hand, and you lay yours beside his and hers. A circle of hands on a rock, old earthen symbol. A circle of people's hands of different sizes and hues. And looking at our hands on the rock for the briefest of moments, we might forget all our crosses and crescents and stars. We'd notice the circle of similar hand shapes and see what unites us, flesh, blood, skin and bone. Might it not be nicer beyond judgments and doctrines to honor each other as we realize we are all simply human?
Wow. This is beautiful. Absolutely wonderful. I have a poem here by J.J. Middleway, who's a member of the order. It's stuck here on my wall. And I think it speaks very much to this, if it's okay to read this. I'm not a Christian, yet Christ is all around. I'm not a Buddhist, yet Buddha is my ground. I am not a Muslim, yet Allah's here in all I see. I'm not a Hindu, yet Krishna speaks to me. I'm not an atheist, yet nothingness counts too. I walk the path of Yahweh, although I'm not a Jew. None of these and all of these and more. If one excludes the others, love's truth goes out the door. Come build a mighty rainbow, embracing all beliefs and creeds. Form something even greater than our wildest dreams exceed. Dream this mighty rainbow encircling the earth. Sacrifice our dogma. Celebrate rebirth. JJ, I hope it's okay for reading that one out. So just beautiful. I mean, I think they both very, very speak to each other. Pat, I know this by Rumi, out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there's a field, I'll meet you there. When the soul lies down in that grass, the world is too full to talk about. Ideas, language, even the phrase each other doesn't make any sense. Rumi, just beautiful. So, and Vincent says, the diversity of Druidry and peace is beautiful, regardless of what gods we follow. We can still hold hands and enjoy that sunrise by the sea. And I think that reaching out of hands, on the rock is just a beautiful image. So thank you so, so much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Have you more to say?
I've come to the end of what I prepared.
That's okay, because that's perfect, because we've come to the end of our time.
Some of the alleyways could lead to days and months of discussion and exploration, but
it's brilliant.
A pleasure with you. Thank you.
I often end on the last question. What is your favorite season? And now that you're living in Morocco, I don't know what that means. And what is your favorite, if you follow the Wheel of the Year, what is your favorite ceremony following the Wheel of the Year?
I think the answer to both of those is this is gonna surprise Dave the Bard, who always goes on about how he loves summer and hates winter. For me, I really love winter. There's something special about in the ceremony, that the extinction of the last light and its utter darkness, and then the lighting of the new candle. And I mean, that obviously resonates strongly with my own spiritual journey, so that's perhaps why I resonate with that. And winter in the mountains is such a special time. I mean, it's very dangerous. I've had 2 near misses where I've nearly died. Once an avalanche, set off an avalanche. Another time I was
Okay.
I did, yeah. And another time I was in a blizzard on the Cairngorms and nearly got blown off a ridge. So winter is harsh, but there are times in winter where you get, a temperature inversion. So you get a cloud low down in the valley, and you're up on a mountain peak or a ridge in the snow, and the air is crystal clear, and all you see is other mountains pointing up above the sea of clouds underneath. And it's one of the most magical experiences in nature. So winter has a harsh beauty, and that's what nature is to me. Nature is not just lovely, beautiful, soft and cuddly. It's also very harsh. We have to respect nature, but also very beautiful.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Lisa says, we're cherishing our snow and praying for more. Okay, just Sean says, what's Marc's most influential book? Last question.
As you can see by my bookcase there, which isn't all of my books, my daughter recently tried to count all my books in the house, lying around here, there, and everywhere, and I think she got over 300 and said, "Dad, you got a lot of books." I can't say what my most influential is because I'm constantly reading more. I very rarely finish a book, but I dig in and out, and years later suddenly find one, and something else speaks to me, or whatever. So that's the only answer I can give to that.
What book are you reading now?
Gosh, I don't even know where to start. What have I got on my side? Book of poetry by Meister Eckhart. Meister Eckhart's Book of the Heart. So it's little quotes from him. The Dhammapada, Words of the Buddha.
Okay.
I've got Mara Freeman's Kindling the Celtic Spirit. So that's just what's lying on my desk.
Okay, so I hope that answers your question, Sean. And Gabriella, he said winter. He didn't say favorite festival. She likes to bet, although you haven't bet today on what my guest will say. So, do you have a favorite festival, or is it? You did. You said the solstice. Sorry.
Yeah, that little part of that one ceremony. I mean, I've perhaps not found the symbolism in all the others as profound as that one, but you can see why. It's because that speaks to me so much.
I love that.
And as we change, as we grow, if we're not growing and changing in things, then we're stagnating. So I know that next year I might have a different favorite one, and the year after a different. That's fine. That's how we have it.
Wonderful. Listen, it has been such a joy talking to you, Marc. Very, very interesting. And I know from the people here said, I needed to hear this. This has just been so helpful. A really, really interesting conversation. So you've really, really contributed to this wonderful chat this evening. Thank you so much. So I'll let you say goodnight to everybody, and then you can go backstage, and then I'll finish up.
Okay. Well, thank you everyone for listening, and it's been a privilege to share some of my personal journey with you. And please feel free to contact me to continue some of these discussions. Peace and blessings to you all. Thank you.
So how can they contact you? Is it through not everybody here is an OBOD member, so how can they contact you if they wanted to join in any discussion?
Is it possible to get in touch through the office or through you in the first instance?
Yeah, I suppose they could do it through the office, and then they'd have to ask you, is it okay to pass on your email to or
on the Facebook group. There's a Facebook group called Christianity and Druidry, and
that's open. It's not just, it's open to anybody.
you have to be accepted. Anyone can apply, but you have to be accepted. But if you're
Okay, so OBOD and sorry,
in
it's
any of these, yeah,
it's what do you call it? I'm going to put it in the, I'll put it in the chat. What's it called?
Druidry and Christianity, and I can send you the link. I'm sorry for people that aren't on Facebook. I appreciate that choice. I put it in the chat there. I don't know if that comes up for you.
Oh, you put it in the private chat. Hold on a second. I will just get that. Oh, I'm opening it up now. Sorry, it's gone into my. Have I lost myself? Okay. I'm just going to put that in. I can't copy. Sorry, I can't. My mouse is misbehaving. So can you put it in the? Oh, you can't put it in the main chat, can you?
You know how to do that on your platform.
Is it? Do you see the comments? Do you see where the comments?
Yeah.
Are you able to? Is there a box at the bottom that you can put it in?
No. Yeah, people are saying they hate Facebook, so I appreciate that.
Okay, Pat, I'll send it to Pat, and Pat can put it on Facebook or put it up. Okay. I can't. I don't. My mouse is down. My whatever it is, the mouse you hold in your hand, my real mouse, as opposed to my virtual mouse, is in the other room. So I'm on that pad, and I can never manage it. So anyway, so it's been just such a joy, Marc, and thank you. And maybe we'll meet somewhere in Britain, in Glastonbury, or Morocco. Who knows? So
yeah, feel free to come trekking with us. Yeah,
that would be lovely. Absolutely brilliant. Thank you. Sally has put it in. Thank you very much. So it's there on the, and so is Sal. Brilliant. It's great, you see, to have all these assistants that people. All I have to say, well, has anyone got the reference for, or remember this quote? And somebody does the research, and up it comes. I mean, the capability of this platform is just, it's mind-blowing. So having researchers here who are viewers is just wonderful. So listen, I'll say goodnight to you. You stay on, and we'll look at those comments afterwards. But I'm going to, you say goodnight to everybody, and then I'll send you backstage.
Great. Bless you all. Thank you so much for listening. Appreciate you all.
So thank you all and your contributions. I'm so sorry. There were so many comments and some very, very long to read. So we'll go back. Marc and I will read them. And thank you so much for your contribution to these conversations. And it animates these conversations so much for me. So I wish you all a good evening, good afternoon, good morning. Enjoy the rest of your day. And I look forward to seeing you next week for another Fireside Chat. So until then, slán go fóill.